In this video, we're going to talk about emergency preparedness uh, and personal preparedness at a high level as an overview. Quick question for starting off. How many of you have been impacted by disaster events? Flooding, fires, evacuations? Were you ready? If not, have you made changes since? Would you be comfortable being at work if your family was home during an emergency? I'd like to focus on personal preparedness, especially for responders and businesses. It all ties together because how can you be expected to go in to do your job, especially if that job is something like, the critical services, firefighters, police, responders, things like that, if you don't know if your family is taken care of, or if you're at work and an event happens, a disaster, you'd panic less. Panic less. If you knew your family knew what to do, you had a plan and you had the provisions in place for that, you would be more at ease. What do we do if there's an emergency? Easy. Call 911, sit back, wait for emergency services to arrive. Well, that's not always the case. There's lots of things that could disrupt that. Areas where I've worked, especially in a rural setting, policing resources can be stretched at the best of times. And so you might have to wait a while for a response. Ambulances. You see lots of articles and news stories and announcements where they're in different code reds, code yellows, where there's just not enough ambulances, where the ambulances are stuck waiting at the hospitals to discharge or unload patients, turn them over to the healthcare facility, and yet the ambulance is there. Fire department, that's my biggest area of expertise or experience. And so, if a rig shows up to a call, quite often the guys are medically trained and they're just physically closer with the number of stations than a lot of ambulance units. And so if they hop in the back to either help the ambulance folks with the call, or maybe they hop in the ambulance to drive and let the generally higher trained ambulance staff deal with the patient. Now that unit is out of commission basically until it goes to the hospital and retrieves its crew. I've been at many calls where we've even called requesting police support. We're the fire department requesting police support, and we get the response, we don't have any available units, too busy. There was a show a while ago, Trouble the Waters, and it played 911 clips from Hurricane Katrina, and people calling in saying we've broken through the ceiling, we're in our attic, we're on the roof, the water's coming up, what do we do? And the dispatchers in many cases plainly told them there's nobody coming, there's no help available. It's something that is a reality. Expectations and reality are often different. 80% of North Americans expect emergency agencies to monitor social media. That if they just post to one of their social media accounts that they need help, someone is watching and help is on the way. 33% expect help to show up within 60 minutes. I remember when I was a fire inspector, we timed one time when we went to a business and said, okay, let's pull the alarm as a test, and let's see how long it takes for the fire department to be informed that there was a call. Response time, they were looking at in this municipality between 8 and 10 minutes is what they wanted to achieve. So we pulled it and waited and waited and waited, and it went to the alarm company, and it bounced to whichever country that company had subcontracted out its monitoring to, and it bounced around and around and around. 11 minutes it took for the local fire department to even be made aware that there was a call. So those expectations are very different, and especially if it's something that's a mass casualty or mass emergency, a large scale event. If roads are blocked with either traffic congestion or debris, if there's lots of other calls to go to, you can expect to wait a long time, just like calling for a tow truck. It may be hours or days to get a tow truck. Which of these are you? Is this you? Is your fuel tank on full all the time? Or do you generally run on vapors or fumes? So how far can I get? I'm in the red, but I'm still going. I forgot to fill up. Full, empty. This is a behavioral change. This is just something you can do. It doesn't really cost any more money, doesn't really cost any more time. It's just something, a habit to get into that will help you going forward. Big steps. Know your risks, make a plan, get a kit. So this is, I'm talking from the Canadian perspective here, just because that's where I am, and that's where most of my experience is. Although the majority of Canadians believe that they have having an emergency plan and an emergency kit are important, only a small minority have actually created them. Know the risks. So fires. So do you live in an area that's heavily wooded or has experienced a lot of fires in the past? A forest protection area. Tornadoes. We often hear tornado alley, different things like that. With the changing weather and temperatures and whatnot, these can shift. And what a big change that would be if houses aren't built to tornado standards and suddenly the tornado belt shifts. Do you have trees close to your house that could fall over? Hail. Are you by a rail line? Flooding. Are you in a floodplain or in a low-lying area or places that have been impacted before by flooding? Critical infrastructure. Do you only have one way in or out from your location? Wind patterns, proximity to large chemical sites, large industrial facilities. Power grids. Ice storms. This is a shot from, I believe, the 2013 flooding in Calgary. There is another one from the 2013 flood in Calgary. Things can change quickly. So what do you do? In your area, learn about the local warning systems. Is it an emergency alert system? Do you have other, I know in my area out here in the country, we have, it's called Safe and Sound. And you get updates on different things, whether it's fire restrictions, fire bans. Lately, we've had a very aggressive grizzly in the area that has put people in the hospital. The same grizzly is responsible for a death a few years ago. There's been horses killed very near our farm. So learn what those risks are. Find ways, whether it's a community group that you start, different pages on different social media that maybe you keep each other informed. Have a little local calling system. Sign up for whatever's available. Find out your local risks. What are the crime stats? Call your emergency management group or agency. Talk to people in your area. When we moved out here, we talked to some of the neighbors. How often has the power gone out? What other things have you had? Have there ever been fires? Has anyone been robbed in the area? What are the local problems or benefits? You can find a lot of this stuff online, just checking things out. Start with the basics. Keep everything simple. If you want resilience is how do you make yourself basically able to withstand, adapt to things that happen. Start with the basics. Shelter. Do you have shelter? What would happen if you had to leave your home or if you were away from home and had to get home? Is it a tent that you put in your car? Is it the car itself? Is it setting up the tent within your house to create a small pocket of warmth if the heat goes out? Security. Can you defend yourself? Can you look after your loved ones? There's lots of non-lethal security things you can do. Defense things you can do to harden your house, your vehicles, protect your property, and to protect your loved ones, all in the wide spectrum. So you don't have to, you might say, well, I'm against guns. There's lots of things you can do to help protect yourself. Water, very, very important. Where would you get water? Food, the actual food itself and the food preparation. Power. Everything we do right now is quite tied to electricity. I've read lots of reports and different studies on, stating facts that or stats that if the power went out, the grid went down for a year, 90% of the population would die in North America. That's how tied we are to electricity. Emergency plans. So you want to know your risks, make a plan. What kind of plans are there? Well, how would you prepare? How would you look after your family, for example, 72 hours? That was always the big push, and it still is on a lot of emergency response organizations, emergency management organizations, is prep for 72 hours. Now, they are expanding that. A lot of the ones I've seen now are going to prepare for 2 weeks. But start small. How would you, first aid, do you know what to do? Food. What about no electricity, no heat, no ATM? Can't use the bank, can't use credit cards. What do you do? How would you cope with power, without power, or water from the tap? Or when I worked in water and wastewater, having the potable water is one thing, but what about the wastewater? What do you do with that? The sanitation on that side. If you do security audits of water treatment facilities versus wastewater, I would think that you might be surprised with where the importance would be. I had heard a story that a spot in Italy, I believe it was, that had a big flood wall that could come up, a big barrier to prevent ocean tides from coming in. But because a lot of the sewage systems just, the solution to pollution is dilution, so it dumps into the riverways and gets carried out to sea. Well, when you put that big flood wall up, you're basically sitting in a big tank of your own sewage. And so they might say, put the wall down, let's take our chances. How do you contact your family? How do you get information? How do you prepare your house for flood, fire? What about a riot? Security events? Here's a few basic plans. Family reunification plan, family shelter plan, pet preparedness, home emergency plan, work emergency plan. So family reunification plan. Start by thinking about an out-of-area contact and 2 out-of-province contacts. Write them down. If quite often in a disaster or emergency event, if it's localized, the local phone systems will be overwhelmed. But the outbound to out of province or out of area, it may get through. It's just like sending texts. It can go through in small packets. So whereas a phone might be down, maybe the system can sneak text through, but have out of area contacts and out of province. So for me, it's always been my mom. I know mom and dad are pretty much always at the farm. They're out of province. And so I've told people, if you can't get a hold, if something happens, you can't get a hold of me, call my mom, call grandma, and let her know that you're okay or where you are, or if you need help. And if everybody checks into that one source, that one point, it's a good plan to have. 2 meeting places outside of your home. And go through this. Practice it. Don't just plan it, but then go through it. 2 meeting places outside of your neighborhood. So if you have to leave your house, maybe your house is on fire. It's localized, very localized just to you, this emergency. Where are you going to go? Well, I always told our kids, we had a couple of great neighbors just a few doors down, Doug and Deb. And I'd always tell my kids, if there's a problem here, you just get out and you go to Doug and Deb's and you wait there. And that's where I'll look for you. Okay, well, what if the whole neighborhood is impacted? Where can they go outside of that? Where would you meet up with your family? It's funny, I'll go back to this slide for a second. It says safe place on that slide. When I would do emergency planning for businesses, and they would say muster point. Muster point. What is a muster point? Well, that's where everybody leaves. When they evacuate the building, they go to that muster point for updates to make sure they're safe, things like that. And people would almost without fail say, why do they call it muster point? Can we call it something else? Well, a safe place, while I get the wording, it might not be safe. I said, well, how about we call it a safe placer than where you just were? Or, yeah, a place that's safer than where you just were. And we ended up coming right back to, let's just call it a muster point. That's muster, not mustard, not the condiment. Family shelter plan. What are temporary accommodations? Now, this picture, kind of tongue in cheek, is for a bomb shelter or a survival shelter, a doomsday bunker. You might have one of those. Great. Where would you go? Is it a hotel? Well, large scale event, large localized event, there may be no hotels. Have you prearranged with friends that you could go to their place? What about childcare? What if the problem is at your daycare or your facility? Just things to think about. The thinking is the first step. Just start to jot things down. Pets. You can get stickers that say, "In case of fire, please save our pets, dogs and cats." At our farm here, I have to register every time I get animals. So I'll say, okay, I've got 6 horses, so that if there's any kind of an event that involves a specific horse disease or horse ailment, I can get notified saying, hey, beware of this. Or when I get chickens, I'm going to have to register that I have chickens. Not necessarily that the fire department's going to save them, but just to keep tabs on things. Having been with fire, we would often have people say, can you go back in? Or people would go back in themselves, go back in for my pet. So it's good to plan for that. Are your pets welcome at a reception center, at your friend's place, at a hotel? Do you have a pet kit ready? Are the pets on medications? Do you have food for them? A lot of the kits and planning that we do is that when you go someplace, you don't want to be an instant burden on them. I've gotten many, many cats, or been called to many, many cats in trees as a firefighter. Only one did I ever truly have to rescue that would never have gotten down on its own. The rest, like the saying goes, have you ever seen the skeleton of a cat in a tree? Nope. It may not be graceful, but it will probably get down on its own. Don't put yourself at risk to get them. So again, do you have a pet carrier ready? Do you close the door on the room where your pet sleeps? Right? Closing doors helps keep smoke out of an area. But as this cat is doing, as and I've seen ours do, they can open some of those doors. Home emergency plan. Become familiar with community evacuation routes. Now, this one's kind of hard because, you don't know which road necessarily will be impacted by an emergency, but quite often you can kind of pre-designate areas. But how would you get out of your area? What are a couple of routes you could take to get out? And become familiar with those plans at school, daycares, and works. Where are the schools going? Where are they evacuating to? I had done some work with a detention facility. They had multiple detention centers all in the same area, and they said, we'll just move these inmates from this one to that one. Well, what if the whole area is impacted? How would you get everyone safely out? Would you get everyone safely out? Would you shelter in place or would you evacuate? Home emergency plan. Fire departments always say, have 2 means of egress or 2 ways to get out from every room in your house, whether that's a window, a door. If it's on the 2nd floor, do you need one of those ladders that you can throw out the window and climb down the side? Well, I guess you don't throw the whole ladder out the window. You secure it and you deploy it out the window. And then where would you meet? And then practice it. Actually go through these things, opening the window. Don't maybe throw the chair through the window, but let the kids know, let people know, hey, here's how you get out. Do you have double deadbolts? That means you need a key to operate the lock from both the inside and the outside. Do people know where the key is? Do you have first aid training? Do you store combustibles safely? I've talked about having spare fuel for your vehicle, or maybe an extra propane tank for your barbecue. Store it safely. Home planning. What would you do if you had no power? And, if the batteries have ever died in your electronic thermostat, you'll know that you may have power to the house and you may have natural gas to the house, but your furnace still won't work if you don't have batteries for that thermostat. If the power goes out, your furnace won't work. There's electric blower motors on there. Your natural gas fireplace might not kick in or start up without power. Think about all these things. What about no telephone? Even if you have a landline, which not many people do anymore, if it's one of the cordless phones that's plugged into your landline, it will not work if the power goes out. You need an old style plug-in phone, no batteries, with a cord attached to it. What if you can't get groceries? What if you can't access money? Where would you get water from in your home if the water was out? You have bottled water? Some options are your hot water tank or your water heater. There's a drain at the bottom you can open up. Get water from there. Your toilet tank. It is all potable water. Potable means it's safe to drink. Now, it's kind of ridiculous in a sense that we're using treated, safe to drink water to flush our toilets. But in an emergency situation, there's a good little amount of water there that you could tap into and drink. Food storage. Without a grocery store visit, could you survive 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months? Start simple. Buy extra of what you eat, non-perishables. Plan 3 breakfasts, 3 lunches, and 3 suppers. Then get 3 tubs, boxes, bags, containers, label them day 1, 2, 3, and fill them up. Here's my oatmeal for breakfast for day 1. Here's a couple of granola bars for a snack on day 1. Here's my, noodles for lunch. Start with that stuff. Hopefully it's stuff that you can either prepare with very little fuel or that you have means, and then think about that. How do you prepare it? Sure, you could open up the pack of noodles and eat them raw. Not as tasty. Maybe think about, do I have a little camping stove? Do I have some way to prepare this food? Get the 3 boxes ready. There you go. You've got 3 days. I can pretty much guarantee you will feel better about it. You'll feel more prepared. You'll have done something to take responsibility for yourself. It does feel good, and you have to buy food anyways. And then you can buy in bulk and save money. Is this your pantry? Or is that your pantry? Work emergency plan. Be familiar with the emergency plan at your workplace. I don't know if there's any job I've ever started that I haven't had to take it upon myself to ask, where's the nearest fire escape? Which way do I go to get out? Where's the muster point? Where are the first aid kits? Now, I know most onboarding programs say, oh yeah, leader, go through this with your staff on day 1. I've done that with my staff, but that's because I'm a bit of a nerd or freak or enthusiast. I'm passionate about this stuff, and I take it upon myself to do that. No one else has ever done that with me. What's your role in the event of a disaster? Do you know what to do? After disaster, follow the advice of local emergency officials. Stay informed. Listen to the radio and TV. Again, if you have a battery-operated radio, some way to get radio. Maybe you've got spare batteries for your phone, and the internet might be up, and you can get news on your phone. Don't enter the disaster area unless you're directed to by emergency officials. Now, we're on to the get a kit part. Well, what kind of kits are they? What do they mean by kits? Well, there's an everyday carry kit. That's something you have on you all the time. It kind of keeps you more prepared. Little picture in the top right, that's what I have with me all the time. I've got my phone, which has a flashlight in it. I've got a lighter. I've got a knife. And I've got my wallet where I have a little bit of cash. So then there's a car kit. That's seasonal. Again, I've talked about in other videos where it's time to make that transition from your summer to your winter kit. You have an office kit. Very important, especially if you wear footwear that might not be appropriate for an evacuation. A lot of people get injured just going down the stairs when there's a fire alarm. If you wear high heels, have flats at your office so that you can change into them, or running shoes. If your shoes are slippery, have something that's a little grippier. Maybe have when I was at the office, I had a spare change of clothes because if I knew I had to evacuate and get home, I might not want to wear my suit. So I had just some street clothes that I could change into, running shoes instead of my dress shoes, spare battery for my phone, charging cable, a little bit of cash. Think about defense. Do you want something, that's legal and non-lethal, or something to help you? You have a water bottle, a snack, something like that. A bug out bag or a bob. That's a different kind. We'll talk about kits in a later video. Names you'll hear: bug out bag, get home bag, everyday carry, the inch bag, which means I'm not coming home. And the list goes on. You can take all shapes and sizes. Point is, get a kit. You probably have the items that are in the kit in your home. They're just all over the place. You want to get them in one place so you can quickly grab it and go. Sometimes you don't get a lot of time to evacuate when the evacuation order comes in. Sometimes it's only a few minutes. Some things you should put in your kit. Water. Now that picture is a bit silly. It says dehydrated water. So just add water and you'll have water. But get some water. A means of light, so flashlights with spare batteries if they're not solar or wind up. A radio, a can opener if you're going to have some canned food in there that's not a quick pull tab opening. Again, the battery powered radio. Some of them have lights, sirens, radios, all together. First aid kit. Now that can be as simple as just a few Band-Aids. I always like to have tweezers and nail clippers because those are the things I use the most. A Fox 40 whistle. I love these things. When I used to lifeguard, we'd use Fox 40 whistles. That serves all kinds of purposes. You can signal for help. It is painful if you experience one blasted at close range. So it could be a defensive tool. You could use it to scare animals away potentially. All kinds of things. So stick with the basics again. Basics, basics, basics. Food, even if it's just some snacks and water. A little bit of cash, a whistle, I recommend that. Charge spare battery for your phone or one of those battery banks with a cord you can plug into. A light, a means of protection or defense. We'll talk about that in a later video. Paper copies of important phone numbers. It might just be your kids' phone numbers, your family's phone numbers. If they're all on your phone and your phone's dead, if you've got these numbers on a piece of paper, you could ask to borrow someone's phone or use a phone to contact people. Maybe it's your insurance company. Maybe it's your security firm. Some comfort or distraction items, especially important if you have kids. What's an essential item to them might be different for you if it's their favorite stuffed animal, coloring book, a deck of cards, something like that. This starts with you. Again, the base of the pyramid is the individual or the family. Before municipal help, before state or provincial help, before federal help. Do your part. Be prepared.